Hey guys! Tonight, we're diving into a story that starts with a scream in the dark. A scream that echoes through a sleepy Colorado neighborhood and ricochets into one of the most heartbreaking miscarriages of justice you've probably never heard about. Picture this. It's 1997. The leaves are curling brown on the sidewalks of Willow Creek, and Catherine Miller, a single mom and grad student, is jolted from her shallow, overworked sleep by a sound no parent ever wants to hear. It's a scream. Sharp, young, and it's coming from her 6-year-old son, Ethan's bedroom. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing the time zones collide. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit up instantly, heart thudding in that unpleasant way, like it skipped a step and is playing catch-up with panic. The apartment is silent again. Too silent. You scramble out of bed, feet cold against the floor, rushing down the hallway toward Ethan's room. The door is ajar. Your fingers tremble as you push it open. Empty. No sign of him. No crumpled Star Wars sheets. No messy hair poking out from beneath the covers. Just a stillness that hums like something wrong. You spin. You call his name once, then louder. Then, someone grabs you from behind. You don't see the face, only the blur of movement and the pain shooting through your arm as you're thrown to the ground. There's a mask. Black, rubber, some kind of old Halloween thing. Maybe. It smells like mold and sweat. You fight back, kick, claw, scream like only a mother can. Then it's gone. When you scramble to your feet and stagger down the hall, breath wheezing through your lungs, you see him, Ethan, face down in the hallway, still in his pajamas, one small hand curled, like he might have tried to crawl. The world slows down to a buzz in your ears as you drop to your knees beside him. You turn him over, his lips are tinged purple, his eyes are closed. There's something around his neck, was around his neck, a faint red mark, and next to him, absurdly ordinary, lies a butter knife. From your own kitchen, the first 911 call comes out garbled. You're not even sure what you said. Just Ethan's name and help over and over. Paramedics arrive. Then police, then tape, a clipboard. Someone asking you questions when all you want to do is crawl inside your skin and disappear. The historical fact here, because, yes, even in tragedy, context finds its place, is that Colorado in the late 90s was experiencing a notable rise in public suspicion of single mothers involved in violent crime cases. Following the sensationalized Susan Smith case of 1994, media bias often preemptively cast doubt, especially when mental health was part of the profile. Historians still argue whether public trust in female victims had ever fully recovered after that. But you don't know any of that right now. You're just staring at Ethan's door, still ajar, wondering if maybe, just maybe, you had left it that way. If that was how someone got in. The cops do a slow, methodical sweep of the apartment. They bag the knife, take photos of your hands, ask if you've been drinking. They notice your arm is bruised. Great. That'll go into some report. You're offered a blanket, and someone hands you a bottle of water you won't drink. Here's the fringe detail they don't teach in police academy. The scent of a just-washed child's blanket can break you in half. You're sitting on the edge of the hallway rug when you catch it, fabric softener, shampoo, and little boy dreams, and that's when you lose it. Sobbing, you pull your knees to your chest while voices echo around you. Looks like forced entries unlikely. Kitchen drawers not disturbed. Knife could have been taken earlier. She's got scratches, defensive wounds. Maybe, but let's keep an open file. You don't realize it yet, but even now, the narrative is already bending. It's dawn before they let you ride in the back of the cruiser to the station. Not under arrest, just to talk. The sun's coming up over Willow Creek, casting this golden light that somehow feels cruel, like the world doesn't deserve it today. You're still in your robe. You've got one slipper on and you can't remember where the other went. Your hair's a mess. The officer driving tries to offer a soft word, but it rings hollow. He has 2 daughters, he says, and he can't imagine. You almost believe he means it. By the time they let you go home, hours have passed, the house is sealed up, A neighbor stares. Another one closes a curtain. Willow Creek isn't the kind of town where crime happens. It's the kind of town where everyone still brings pies to the block party, and where a front porch light staying off for a few nights starts the rumor mill. You sit in the front seat of a borrowed patrol car, staring at your own door, wondering if you'll ever walk through it again without seeing that knife. Here's something odd to tuck away. In ancient Rome, butter was considered a barbarian import and rarely used, especially for cooking. The idea that a Roman citizen might die by butter knife would have been both impossible and mildly insulting. But here, in 1997, that bland little utensil becomes a weapon and a symbol of how things are about to spiral. You walk back into the apartment later that day, keys trembling in your hand, even though the lock's already been changed. A police officer steps aside, clipboard in hand, nodding awkwardly. The living room looks exactly the same, except you now know where they stood, where they walked, what they touched. The coffee table is just slightly out of place, the fridge doors still ajar. They left Ethan's bedroom untouched, like a museum exhibit of heartbreak. And in the hallway, you don't even glance down. You walk past fast enough to make the floor creak, eyes fixed ahead. The butter knife is gone. Of course, bagged, tagged, processed. You try not to imagine where it is now on a shelf in evidence, sitting beside sandwich bags full of stolen jewelry and misplaced bullets. It's absurd. Really, a butter knife. The kind you spread jelly with, the kind Ethan used to bang on his cereal bowl when he was being silly. And yet, here we are. They say the crime scene was too neat. That's what one detective mutters while reviewing the photos. No signs of forced entry, no real struggle, no broken lamp, no scattered books, just a mark on Ethan's neck and a single bruise on your wrist. The cops take it as suspicious, as if trauma makes people messy on cue. But you're not thinking about any of that yet. You're trying to remember if you locked the door before bed. You usually do, always. It's a ritual twist to the lock, then pull it to check. But that night, you're not sure. The memory is slippery, like trying to hold onto soap in a flood. You call your sister, Marcy, in Denver. She sobs so loudly you have to hold the phone away from your ear. She wants to come. She'll bring casseroles. You say, okay, but don't remember giving her your spare key. Over the next few days, the investigation grinds forward in small, suspicious steps. You're cooperating fully, but the questions get tighter, stranger. They ask about Ethan's school behavior, about your grades at the university, about your breakup with Daniel. You learn quickly. Every answer opens a door they weren't meant to walk through. Was Ethan a happy child? Did you ever raise your voice at him? Did you notice anything unusual in his behavior lately? You say no, or maybe yes. You start second-guessing yourself, editing your memories in real time. Here's the mainstream historical detail. They don't usually slip into bedtime stories. The 90s saw a quiet boom in forensic psychology, especially the profiling of maternal filicide suspects. You become aware of that phrase very quickly. Maternal filicide. As if combining Greek roots somehow makes it more scientific. Historians still argue whether this profiling helped or hurt more women than it protected. The assumption that a mother, under stress, might snap was comforting to some prosecutors. It made sense. It explained away the absurd and horrifying in neat courtroom terms, but it also meant that once suspicion took root, it grew like kudzu. They start asking you to come in for follow-up statements. You agree. You keep thinking, if I just tell them everything, if I walk them through the night again and again, they'll see I'm not hiding anything. You're sleep deprived. You forget to eat. Your clothes hang looser on you after just a week. One afternoon, you return from the station to find a sticky note on your door, praying for your soul, underlined. You don't know who left it, but you have a guess. Mrs. Folsom from 2 doors down hasn't made eye contact since the second day. She used to give Ethan butterscotch candies when he rode his scooter by her porch. Now, she won't even look at his scooter, which still lies sideways in the grass. You go through the motions of grieving, but it feels like staging. The funeral is small. You keep it private. Ethan's favorite dinosaur shirt is folded beneath his head in the casket. No open viewing. You couldn't have handled it. When the detective stops by the day after the service, he doesn't ask how you're doing. He asks if he can take another look at your kitchen drawers. That night, you can't sleep. Every creak in the house sounds like footsteps. You lie in bed and stare at the ceiling, counting the slow flashes of the street lamp outside your window. You think about the knife again, where it was kept, how many there were in the drawer. You think, did I ever not put it away? Could someone have come in during the day? You remember Ethan climbing up on a chair once to get a spoon, knocking over the entire drawer in the process. It had happened in April. He had cried, and you'd bandaged his knee. It felt like a story from another life now, a dream version of motherhood that ended the moment the scream pierced your sleep. Here's a tidbit to end on. Before you finally drift off tonight, the ancient Egyptians believed knives had dual spirits. One protective, one vengeful. The same blade that cut bread could summon a god, if wielded with intention. In a way, maybe that's what happened here. Someone used a blade that didn't belong to them and summoned something no one could undo. In the official report, the weapon will be described as unremarkable, a plain stainless steel butter knife. You know better. You sit across from the detective in a beige room that smells like burnt coffee and dry erase markers. The clock on the wall ticks louder than it should. He's polite, but not warm. His questions today aren't just about that night anymore, sorry. Not that night. The night Ethan died. No, today he wants to talk about your past. How's your relationship with Daniel these days? You hesitate. That question never leads anywhere good. You tell him the truth, or something close enough. Daniel's your ex-husband. You've been separated for almost 4 years. You have joint custody on paper, but in practice, Ethan was always with you. Daniel wasn't exactly rushing to attend parent-teacher meetings. The detective nods, but you can tell he's already decided something. He scribbles something down. Then comes the next question. Casual, like asking what you had for lunch. Ever see a therapist for anything? Anxiety, depression. There it is. You flinch. Internally, you knew this would come up eventually. You say yes. Back in grad school, you had panic attacks. It was a hard semester. You were working 2 jobs, taking care of Ethan, and studying for finals. You got help. You were proud of that at the time. Now, you're not so sure. He smiles faintly, like you've just confirmed a hypothesis. That night, back at home, you pull out the photo album. You flip past Ethan's baby pictures, his first day of kindergarten. The drawing he made of your cat, even though you don't have a cat, each page feels like it's thinned out, like the pictures might float away if you breathe too hard. You tuck it away in the back of your closet. The next morning, they call you again. A week later, you're sitting in a sterile room at the courthouse, watching from behind a glass wall as Daniel Miller takes the stand, not in trial, not yet just a preliminary hearing. He looks different, cleaner than usual, shaved, hair combed. You can smell the aftershave through the glass, or maybe you're just remembering it. He starts with a sigh, then the rehearsed sadness. Yes, Catherine was under stress. Yes, she sometimes lost her temper. He says he's not here to accuse anyone. He just wants the truth. But every word he drops feels like a breadcrumb in a trail leading to you. He talks about the time you threw a plate during an argument. Never mind that it shattered against the floor. Nowhere near him. He talks about the time you cried for 2 straight hours after Ethan's flu diagnosis. He calls it erratic. You remember him standing in the kitchen that day, arms folded. While you rocked Ethan in your lap, you remember asking him to help and getting a shrug. Now here he is, helping the justice system instead. The DA's office requests a formal psychological evaluation. You sit on a leather couch that makes fart noises when you shift your weight, trying to explain that no, you don't hear voices. And yes, you've been sad, but not dangerous. The psychiatrist is kind enough. She nods, writes notes. You can't read her handwriting, but you can read her expression. She doesn't think you did it. Not that it matters. The detective shows up with a folder later that week. Inside are photos you never wanted to see again. Ethan's bedroom, the hallway, the knife. He tells you calmly that they're reclassifying you from victim to person of interest. You ask if they've looked at anyone else. He says they're pursuing all angles. That's a lie, and you both know it. Historical interlude. Because even the worst stories have context. In 1997, the field of criminal forensics was caught in an awkward puberty. DNA testing was still expensive and slow. Crime scene reconstruction often relied more on gut instinct than hard science. And behavioral profiling was considered a legitimate strategy even when it was based on outdated Freudian junk. Historians still argue whether the psychological profiling craze of the late 90s helped catch criminals or just reinforced confirmation bias. Meanwhile, the neighbor across the street says she saw Catherine standing outside around 3 a.m. with something in her hand. She's vague, uncertain, but she's willing to testify. A classmate from grad school claims you once gave a presentation on female rage in literature. Another says you seemed distant lately. One even mentions how you corrected a professor once and that it seemed aggressive. It builds, quietly, relentlessly, like a wall of sandbags filling up behind you. You start noticing the mail piling up with unfamiliar names, legal terms, court notifications. Your lawyer is a tired public defender named Rob. He calls you kiddo and says, "We'll ride this wave out." But you can tell from his tone he's seen this tide before. Then one morning, you open the door to get the newspaper and find a thin envelope tucked beneath the mat. A grand jury has been convened. You don't know it yet, but within 6 months, you'll be arrested. The photo of you being led out of the apartment in handcuffs will appear in 3 local newspapers. The headline will read, "Willow Creek. Mother charged in son's stabbing." They'll call it a stabbing because saying butter knife ruins the drama. One last quirky note before you close your eyes tonight. In medieval England, butter knives weren't allowed at the royal table, not for safety, but because the king didn't like how they looked. Too dull to be dignified, he said. But here, in 1997, one dull blade becomes a weapon, and one grieving mother becomes a suspect. And the people of Willow Creek, they stop praying for your soul. They start praying you're convicted. You wake up in a jail cell that smells like lemon disinfectant and someone else's fear. There's a tiny window up high that shows a sliver of sky, just enough to remind you what you're missing. They gave you a blanket last night, then scratchy, smelling faintly of bleach. The pillow is harder than the bench. You tried not to cry in front of the guard. You failed. Today is arraignment day. You don't really know what that means until it's happening, until they put you in an orange jumpsuit 2 sizes too big and handcuff you in front of strangers. You shuffle down a hallway under flickering lights and enter a courtroom that looks more like a high school auditorium than you expected. There are people in the pews, not many, but enough. A few neighbors, a reporter you recognize from the Willow Creek Gazette, and of course, Daniel, sitting beside your sister, who doesn't look at you. You search for sympathy in her face, but her expression is unreadable. The judge reads the charge, first-degree murder. You plead not guilty. Your lawyer whispers to you that this is only the beginning. You believe him. That's the worst part. Oh, back in your cell, time collapses. You learn to mark the day by meals tray clatters, indistinct food, lukewarm coffee. The guards call you Miss Miller. A few inmates call you Baby Killer, but mostly they just leave you alone. You write in a spiral notebook. They allow you mostly Ethan's name over and over. A month later, you're moved to the county detention center. There's more space here, but it's colder. The beds are metal. They give you socks, but no shoelaces. Here's the historical note for this chapter. The United States prison population in 1997 had just passed 7 million inmates, a record high at the time. Women accounted for a small but rising percentage, and their incarceration rates were climbing faster than men's, due in part to harsher sentencing laws and domestic-related charges. Historians still argue whether the system was built to punish female defiance or merely indifferent to female survival. Either way, you're in it now. The trial begins in spring 2002. It takes 5 years to get there. 5 years of hearings, of delays, of waiting for lab results that always seem inconclusive. The butter knife had no fingerprints. The bruises on your wrist were consistent with self-infliction. The scream in the night remains unverified. No neighbor claims to have heard it. But the jury hears about your therapy sessions, your sleepless nights, your ex-husband's tearful interviews, the drawings Ethan made of monsters under the bed. That last one really lands. It gets passed around the courtroom like a crumpled secret. You watch it all from the defendant's table, barely breathing. A forensic psychologist takes the stand. He says your emotional profile fits a classic stress-induced detachment syndrome. He explains it with a diagram. The jurors nod, some looking at you like you've just been diagnosed with witchcraft. The prosecutor holds up the butter knife, sealed in a clear plastic bag. Why use this? He asks the room. Not really asking. because it was available, because it was personal, because she wasn't thinking rationally. No one mentions that butter knives are practically useless as weapons. You want to scream, but you don't. You sit there, fists balled in your lap, and take it. Outside, the media has picked up your story. Local news calls you the Willow Creek Widow. Online forums debate your guilt. There's even a blog post titled Motherhood and Murder, the Catherine Miller question. It includes a grainy picture of you holding Ethan on his 5th birthday, cropped just tightly enough to make your smile look strained. Here's a quirky tidbit to file away. In 18th century France, trial pamphlets were sold outside courthouses like popcorn. At a movie theater, people devoured lurid details and hand-drawn sketches of suspects. In that way, not much has changed. Your verdict comes in June. Guilty. 65 years. No parole for 35. You don't cry when you read it. You just stare at the floor, thinking about how you're going to tell Marcy, your sister, that she was wrong. Or maybe you won't. Maybe she's already gone. You're to transfer to the Colorado Correctional Center for Women. It's surrounded by mountains. The irony isn't lost on you. The views are stunning if you squint past the barbed wire. The routine sets in. You become a number. You mop floors. You read books with cracked spines. You avoid eye contact. You tell no one about Ethan. At night, you dream of the hallway, the scream, the knife, and sometimes you dream of someone else in the room. A shadow you never saw clearly, a presence you still can't name. One afternoon, 2 years in, your cellmate asks what you're in for. You say, "My son died." She doesn't ask again. You start writing letters to no one in particular. You write them to Ethan, to your younger self, to an imaginary journalist who might care. You don't know why, just to stay sane. What you don't know, what you can't know, is that a writer named Marla Jennings is about to pull your name from a list of cold cases tied to odd weapons. She's researching someone else entirely, a serial killer named Troy Delano, but we'll get to him soon enough. For now, you sit in your bunk, the smell of cafeteria beans still lingering on your sleeves, and stare at a crack in the ceiling. You count how many seconds it takes for the drip in the bathroom sink to line up with your breath. You're still alive. Barely, and in the eyes of the world, you're already buried. You don't remember exactly when the neighborhood started turning its back. Maybe it was after the funeral. Maybe it was after your mugshot hit the front page. Or maybe it was always there, quiet disapproval, just waiting for an excuse to bubble up. Willow Creek isn't big, fewer than 12,000 people. The kind of place with tidy lawns and mailbox flags, where everyone waves, even if they don't mean it. A town that prides itself on being quiet, decent, unremarkable. Until, suddenly, you're the loudest thing that ever happened here. Back in 1997, there were only 2 homicides reported in your entire county. Both made the news, only one made it onto talk radio. Yours. You used to love your street. The way the maple trees turned gold in October, the dog named Butter who barked at every mail truck, the little bench at the corner where Ethan once sat eating a popsicle with red syrup dripping down his chin. Now, every corner of it feels like a stage. Historians still argue whether small towns protect their own or exile them faster. There's no consensus, but in your case, they didn't wait for the trial to be over. They locked their doors tighter. They stopped bringing casseroles. And when the police came knocking with quiet questions, some neighbors leaned in. The couple across the street said they always thought something was off. The high school girl who babysat once said Ethan was unusually quiet. One woman from yoga class remembered you crying in the locker room in 1996. It becomes a pattern. A soft hum of suspicion disguised as civic duty. Your ex-husband, Daniel, feeds the fire. Daniel was always good at showing up when it counted. Not emotionally, but in the kind of way that makes people think he's responsible. He wore button-down shirts to court, spoke calmly, made eye contact with jurors, a concerned father in every sense of the phrase. You remember the first time he said you were unstable? It wasn't during the custody fight, it was during a dinner party years before. You had dropped a glass, it shattered. You were 6 months postpartum. Everyone laughed awkwardly, but he turned to you and said, "You always take things so personally." Now that sentence is in a police report, reworded, cited, expanded upon. Daniel tells the court you once left Ethan alone in the car for 10 minutes while buying diapers. He fails to mention it was 10 feet away and in full view of the cashier. He says you were obsessed with your grades. that you complained about being tired, that you had a short fuse. He says it all in the same tone he used when explaining insurance deductibles. The jury listens. People like Daniel. He seems rational, steady, slightly boring in a comforting way. Here's a quirky tidbit, one that doesn't help you at all. In 1952, a British researcher coined the term character assassination to describe the slow, strategic erosion of a person's reputation. He said it was most often used against women, and most effective when disguised as concern. You could have told him that without the study. While Daniel gives interviews to local news stations, you sit in your cell practicing how to breathe without making noise. You wonder if Ethan would have remembered any of this, how it felt to be misunderstood, misrepresented. You imagine him at 16, tall and lanky, maybe with your nose, maybe with Daniel's laugh, that laugh you used to find charming until you realized it always came at someone else's expense. You think about all the things Ethan won't get to do. No school dances, no first kiss, no college tours, just a headline, just a gravestone with too much empty space beneath his name. One of the reporters on your case writes a piece titled, Mother or Monster. It includes quotes from former classmates, a former landlord, and one of your professors who vaguely remembers your thesis on grief in literature. It gets picked up by a regional news station. A photo of you from 1995 accompanies the article Dark Circles. Pulled back hair, mid-sentence. You look exhausted. You were exhausted. And now the photo is frozen in time as evidence of something else. You learn later that Marla Jennings read that article. She clipped it, filed it. Not because she thought you were guilty, but because of one detail. The butter knife. It wasn't just the absurdity of it. It was the familiarity. Marla had spent the last 3 years studying unusual homicides. She had a wall of clippings, a Rolodex of oddities, and that knife reminded her of another case, a motel stabbing in Santa Fe, 1994. Same time of night, same lack of motive, same improvised weapon. She didn't know your name yet, but the moment she read butter knife, she underlined it in red ink and wrote Delano in the margin. Meanwhile, in Willow Creek, Daniel remarries. You find out from your sister, who hears it at a grocery store. His new wife works at a dental clinic. They adopt a puppy. Your sister doesn't tell you the breed. She doesn't think it's relevant. You think of Ethan and his plush dog, the one named Waffles. It's probably in a landfill now, or packed away in some charity box with a tag that says gently used. You never felt more removed from your own life than the day you imagined another woman living in your house, drinking from your mug, laughing at Daniel's insurance jokes, not out of jealousy, out of disbelief. You didn't just lose Ethan. You lost everything attached to the word home. For the next year, no one visits, no letters, no birthdays. You don't blame them. You just get quieter. You spend your days cleaning, folding, counting. Some women in prison carve notches in the wall. You use tally marks in the margins of old books. Shakespeare, Dickinson. One book on child psychology you haven't opened since college. You keep reading the same page, something about developmental empathy. And then, in 2005, almost 8 years after the night that wrecked everything, someone does knock on your story again. Her name is Marla Jennings, and she's holding a manila folder thick with names, dates, and one eerily familiar photograph. She introduces herself in the visitor room with a smile too hesitant to be mistaken for pity. You're already seated, arms folded, trying not to hope. You've had other visitors before, paralegals, a student journalist once, and your sister, before she stopped coming. But this woman is different. She's casual, no clipboard, no judgment. Her name is Marla Jennings. She tells you she's a true crime writer. You've never heard of her. She doesn't seem offended. She starts talking, softly, but directly. She's been researching Troy Delano. You freeze at the name, even though it means nothing to you yet. Then she places the folder on the table and pulls out a glossy crime scene photo, a motel room, dated 3 years before Ethan died. A similar crime, same time of night. A woman, dead, a knife from the motel kitchen, placed carefully beside her. No prints, no sign of forced entry, just like yours. You look up. She continues, a string of killings across the Southwest, all marked by strange weapon choices. Can openers, curtain rods, a pencil, all late at night, all quiet, all clean, a forensic oddity. Really, some police departments chalked it up to drug-fueled domestic disputes. But the pattern caught Marla's attention. She tells you Delano was arrested in 2001, convicted of 3 murders. Now on death row in Nevada. He hasn't confessed to anything outside the confirmed 3, but Marla's sure there are more. She leans forward. I think Ethan's death fits the pattern. You sit in silence. You want to believe her, but hope feels dangerous. Sharp, you've learned not to reach for it. Why now, you ask? Marla shrugs. I didn't think your case was related. Until I read about the knife, then I found the court records. Then I saw your photo. She doesn't say what you look like. You appreciate that. Here's your historical fact for the night. In 1916, the FBI introduced the first centralized fingerprint database in the United States. It was meant to modernize justice. But in truth, fingerprint science remained surprisingly fragile. Partial prints, smudged edges, and, of course, human error. Historians still argue whether it helped more innocent people go free or just made wrongful convictions harder to undo. In your case, no fingerprints were found. But now, Marla's telling you there might be something else. She has Delano's prison art, dozens of drawings, creepy things, twisted cartoons, maps of nowhere, and one page filled with symbols and phrases in block letters. One phrase stands out, i.e., seat. Boy, easy breath, butter edge. It hits you like a slap. You can't breathe. You push the folder back like it's burning your hands. Marla says nothing, just watches. Do you think he meant Willow Creek? You ask. I think he meant Ethan, she says. She leaves her card. She tells you she's going to submit what she found to the Innocence Project and to a friend she has in Colorado's Attorney General's office. You nod, but deep down, you think, I've been here too long. No one listens anymore. Still, that night, something shifts. You lie in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, and you allow yourself one forbidden thought. Maybe I'll go home. 3 months later, a new lawyer shows up. His name is Elias Tran. He's young, not green exactly, but eager in a way that makes you nervous. He says Marla sent him. He's reviewed the case, the Delano evidence, the letters, the drawings, and he believes you. He tells you the state is reopening your file. That doesn't mean you're free, but it means something. He says they've located Delano's personal effects, and investigators are reviewing his prison correspondence. They're checking his travel logs. His old job involved HVAC repair. He was mobile. In Colorado, often, the idea that this man might have been nearby that night, maybe parked right outside your home while you slept, makes your skin crawl. You think about the masked face. You still remember the smell, rubber, and sweat. You'd convinced yourself it wasn't real. Now, maybe it was. Marla sends another letter. Inside, a photocopy of a letter Delano once tried to mail, intercepted by prison staff. It references the woman who took the fall for my mess. It's not signed, but the language matches his other letters. The state doesn't call it a confession, but they call it materially significant. Within 2 months, your conviction is under formal review. Your wrists still ache from cold mornings. Your routine doesn't change overnight. You still mop the same floor, eat the same beans. But there's a sliver of space in your chest now, a breath. Where there used to be just pressure, your cellmate notices. You're sitting straighter. She says one day, maybe, you say, quirky side note for your sleepy brain. In Norse mythology, there's a goddess named Sigyn who held a bowl beneath her husband's bound face to catch poison dripping from a snake. The moment she moved, a drop hit him. He screamed, and that scream was said to cause earthquakes. Justice, in that myth, wasn't vengeance. It was endurance. Waiting out the drip. You've been waiting for nearly a decade. Now, for the first time, something is dripping in your favor. The correctional officers don't treat you differently, not at first, but you feel it. A shift, a few fewer glances, a hesitation before they call your name. Word has gotten around. You're the one with the writer, the case that might get reopened. In a place where time rarely changes anything, even the smallest ripple spreads fast. You keep your head down. You still scrub the same cafeteria trays and fold laundry with fingers cracked from soap. But inside, something buzzes. You're cautious with it. You don't let it take over. Hope, after all, is the cruelest cellmate. You've seen it wreck stronger women than you. Still, when Elias returns with a copy of Delano's new confession, yes, a confession, you allow yourself one breath, one real, full breath. He passes it to you without a word. You hold the pages like they're made of glass. Delano's handwriting is tight and angular, each word pressed into the paper like a wound. The language is vague, sinister. He doesn't name Ethan, but he names the house, the layout, the butter knife, the sound of a mother screaming from the floor. You have never read anything so revolting, so strangely accurate. It makes you sick. It also makes you free. Almost. The legal machine is slow. Apologies take longer than convictions. A new hearing is scheduled. The prosecution reviews the letter and admits they can no longer support your conviction. The judge agrees to vacate the sentence. It happens in a courthouse you've never entered before. You wear a borrowed blazer that smells like someone else's perfume. And then, quietly, without ceremony, you are no longer a convict. You are wrongfully imprisoned. It doesn't feel like justice. It feels like paperwork. Back in Willow Creek, the Gazette runs a new headline: Catherine Miller, cleared after nearly a decade in prison. It's 2 columns long, no photo, no apology. People read it in the checkout line and move on. Here's a bit of mainstream history to color in the margins. The National Registry of Exonerations began formal record-keeping in 2012. But by the mid-2000s, over 300 wrongful convictions had already been overturned in the U.S. So many thanks to DNA, journalistic pressure, or confessions like Delano's. Historians still argue whether these cases represent rare mistakes or systemic flaws. Either way, you're now a statistic, a data point, a cautionary tale. You return to the apartment complex, but you don't go inside. It's rented now. A dog barks from the patio. Someone else's flower pot hangs from the railing. You stand on the sidewalk, staring at the window that used to be Ethan's. The curtains are blue now. You don't stay long. The state doesn't pay you right away. First comes a panel, then forms, then more hearings. Elias says you might be eligible for compensation, up to $70, $0 per year served. But it's not guaranteed. They'll ask if you contributed to your own conviction. They'll ask if you were fully cooperative. The irony practically laughs in your face. Meanwhile, people still look at you sideways. Some whisper, a few nod politely. Your sister offers to let you stay with her. You accept, knowing it won't last. Too many words left unspoken between you. Too many days when she didn't pick up the phone. She tries. She really does. She buys groceries you like, gives you the bigger bedroom, but the air stays tight between you. One night she says, "You know, I never wanted to believe it." You don't ask what she did believe. You just nod and say thank you. You try to find a job. Easier said than done. Your resume has a 10-year hole. Your name, while not infamous, is still searchable. You apply for work under your middle name. The first interview goes well until the manager Googles you. The second one ends before it starts. Eventually, you take a part-time job at a dry cleaner. The owner doesn't care about your past. He only cares that you can press a shirt and show up on time. You learn to be grateful for the quiet. The nights are the hardest. You sleep on a twin mattress in a room that's too clean, too quiet. The hum of the fridge is the only sound. You keep a photo of Ethan tucked into a book on the nightstand. It's one of the few things you still have. You touch it sometimes, just to remind yourself he was real. You don't visit his grave yet. You're not ready. Not until you can walk up without rehearsing what you'll say. Here's a fringe detail for your drifting minds. In ancient Japanese law, those wrongly accused of crimes were sometimes given public cleansing ceremonies. Not just acquittals, but formal rituals to restore their standing. The idea was that shame, even undeserved, lingered. The system acknowledged it. You wonder what that would feel like cleansing. Ritual, forgiveness. But in modern Colorado, you settle for a letter. The state sends you an official exoneration statement. It's printed on thick paper, embossed, neatly signed. It says, "The conviction of Catherine Miller is hereby vacated." No mention of Ethan. No mention of loss. Just a signature and silence. You sit on the porch of your sister's house, a mug of lukewarm tea in your hands, and watch the wind pass through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a kid is laughing, a real belly-deep laugh. You close your eyes. You let the sound drift over you. It doesn't fix anything, but it stays a little longer than it used to. You walk into the tiny bookshop downtown because it smells like old paper and wood polish, and because you don't want to go home just yet. The bell above the door jingles a sweet, ordinary sound, and the woman behind the counter barely looks up. That's how it is now. Most people don't recognize you, not immediately. Your hair is shorter, the weight of prison time shows around your eyes, and your name, while once whispered on every porch in Willow Creek, has faded into something more like myth than memory. You browse the shelves without much thought. Psychology, parenting, memoir. Your fingers drift past titles like Ghosts. Then you see it. A slim paperback with a bold red font, Delano's Trail. Inside the Mind of the Southwest's Most Elusive Killer, by Marla Jennings. You freeze. The cover shows a distorted roadmap overlaying a fingerprint. You pick it up with careful hands, like it might burn. You flip through the pages. There's a whole chapter on Willow Creek. On you. Marla doesn't use your real name, calls you C, but you recognize the timeline, the quotes, the heartbreak. She tells the story with grace, with care. She includes your exoneration. She questions the justice system's instincts. She writes, "Sometimes monsters don't hide under beds, they hide in plain sight, behind familiarity, inside bureaucracy. In what we think we know." You close the book. You don't buy it, not yet. But you leave the store a little taller than when you walked in. That night, you do visit the cemetery. It's dusk. The kind of soft lavender sky Ethan used to say looked like cotton candy. The cemetery is quiet, except for a groundskeeper dragging a hose across the grass. You find his grave easily. You always could. You sit down on the edge of the marker, knees pulled in, elbows on thighs. His name is still so small on the stone. Just Ethan Miller. No middle name, no engraving, just the dates 1991 to 1997 and a tiny star etched in the corner. You reach into your coat pocket and pull out a folded drawing, one of his crayons on printer paper. It's a picture of you and him holding hands in front of a lopsided tree. Your heads are huge. Your smiles stretch off the page. You set it at the base of the stone and press your palm flat against the cool marble. "I'm sorry," you whisper. The wind carries the words somewhere you can't follow. Elias calls the next day. He says the state finally approved compensation. It's not just the money, it's the letter attached. A formal apology, 2 pages long. You read it twice, then tuck it away. It doesn't make anything right, but it does make something official. You're no longer a suspect, no longer a case. You're a survivor. Here's a historical curveball. In ancient Babylon, if someone falsely accused another of murder and the accusation led to punishment, the accuser could face the same sentence once the truth came out. Historians still argue whether this was justice or vengeance dressed up as law, but you wonder what Daniel would have done if those rules still applied. He hasn't reached out. You don't expect him to. That part of your life is a door long closed. What shocks you more is that you don't feel anger anymore. Not rage, just distance. Like he's a name in a file you haven't opened in years. Marla writes to you again. A short note. She thanks you for letting her tell the story. Says readers have reached out, some with their own near misses, their own brushes with wrongful suspicion. She includes a quote from her new draft. Justice isn't just the verdict, it's who gets hurt along the way. You pin that sentence on your fridge. You move out of your sister's house and rent a small apartment on the other side of town. 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, a window that looks out over nothing in particular. It's perfect. You buy a kettle, some throw pillows, a clock that ticks too loudly, but keeps you company in the quiet hours. On the bookshelf, yes, you finally bought it lot. Marla's book sits beside a collection of children's poems. Ethan's favorite was always the one about the turtle who couldn't find his shell. You read it aloud sometimes, just to hear a voice in the room. You volunteer twice a week at a local library, helping kids with reading. The first time a little boy holds up a drawing to show you, you have to turn away for a second. Your throat closes, but you smile. You ask him about the colors. He tells you green is the best because it smells like frogs. You laugh. You haven't laughed in years. Here's one last quirky detail for tonight. In early 20th century Paris, widows were permitted to wear lavender dresses as a sign they were beginning to rejoin life after mourning. Not black, not gray. Lavender, a color of transition, of softness. You buy a lavender scarf next week. You wear it on Sundays. Not for anyone, just for you, because grief doesn't go away. But it does, eventually. Make space for something else. The sun filters through your kitchen window in thin strips, cutting across the countertop where your tea steams gently in its mug. You still take it the same way, one sugar, no milk. Some habits outlive everything. You've begun keeping a small notebook again, the kind you once used during grad school. This one is different, though no deadlines, no footnotes, just pages filling slowly with observations, thoughts, names, sometimes just grocery lists, sometimes whole paragraphs that begin with, "If Ethan were here." You don't always finish the sentence. You just let it sit. One entry reads, "I don't feel like a ghost today." You underline it. Elias calls with another update. A journalist from Denver wants to do a follow-up segment on your exoneration, something long form. He says, with soft music and slow-motion shots of you walking thoughtfully through a field. You laugh, decline. I've had enough spotlights for one lifetime. You tell him. He understands. Later that week, a letter arrives from the University of Colorado. An old professor of yours, Dr. Kalman, someone who always liked your writing, heard about the case. She invites you to speak in a guest seminar on wrongful convictions and public memory. She adds that they'd be honored to have your voice in the room. You read the letter 3 times. Then you say yes. At the university, you stand in a room of students with half-zipped backpacks and distracted gazes. You expect skepticism, but when you begin, they go silent. You don't talk about the blood, or the scream, or the knife. You talk about after, what it means to be misjudged, misfiled, misnamed, what it does to a person to be doubted so thoroughly they start to doubt their own memories. One student raises his hand and asks what helped you hold on. You don't hesitate. His name, you say, that's all. On the way home, you pass by a playground, not the one Ethan loved. That one's been torn down, replaced by parking meters. But this one has the same plastic climbing set, the same shaky bridge. You stop and sit on a bench nearby. Watch the kids run. One falls, scrapes a knee, bursts into dramatic sobs. His dad scoops him up like a reflex. You smile, and for once, it doesn't hurt. Here's something oddly historical. In the early 1600s, a German physician argued that grief could cause physical injury to the organs, a concept called traumatische Organschädigung. He was mocked by his peers. But centuries later, science caught up. Broken heart syndrome is real. Grief can swell your heart, make it misfire. The body keeps score. Even when the court system forgets you, historians still argue whether trauma ever really ends. But you've decided that maybe it doesn't have to end in order to soften. One afternoon, while sorting books at the library, you come across a dusty box labeled "Lost and Never Claimed." You open it out of curiosity. Inside are children's books, donated puzzles, and a cassette tape labeled Bedtime 1996. Your hands go still. You take the tape to the listening corner, plug in the ancient headphones, press play, and there it is. Your voice, reading Goodnight Moon. Your voice is younger, brighter. He giggles once in the background when you mispronounce mush. You don't cry. You just sit there, letting it wash over you, like rain on a roof. Afterward, you label it properly. Returned to Catherine Miller. The librarian smiles. No questions asked. You record over it not to erase it, but to preserve it. You digitize it. You send a copy to Elias, to Marla, even to your sister. It's your way of saying thank you without needing to say anything at all. That night, you play it again, tucked beneath a blanket, tea in hand. Your voice, his laugh, a lullaby you forgot you remembered. One final quirky tidbit before you sleep. In ancient Mesopotamia, there was a goddess named Nanshi who listened to the cries of the falsely accused in their dreams. petitioners would leave bowls of water by their beds, hoping her spirit would float through and bring justice in the night. You don't believe in goddesses anymore, but you do believe in listening. And finally, after all these years, someone listened to you. You wake up on a Thursday and don't immediately brace for anything. No court dates, no interviews, no legal jargon or echoing doors. Just the soft whir of the heater and the dull clink of a spoon against ceramic as you stir your breakfast oats. It's been over a year since your release, and your days are starting to feel ordinary. That word used to terrify you. Now it feels like a luxury. You water your plant, a small pothos that seems determined to live no matter how forgetful you are. You check the mailbox, junk mail, a coupon for dish soap, and one hand-addressed envelope. It's from Marla. Inside is a single photo, folded twice. A roadside diner, sunburned hills in the background. A man in a gray shirt standing by a payphone. Scribbled across the back, 1997. Troy Delano, Nevada border, 3 weeks after Ethan. There's something sharp about seeing his face. Not in a mugshot, not in court sketches, but alive. In daylight, leaning on a payphone like any ordinary man's, his posture casual, his jawline forgettable. You stare at it for a long time. He looks unremarkable, and that's what makes it worse. You call Marla. She tells you she's working on a new piece about the banality of monsters. Her words, not yours. She wants to include your perspective, not just your story, but your voice, your reflections. You say yes, but you ask for time. That evening, you take a walk through the older part of town. The buildings here still creak. A few have shuttered windows. The grocery store you once shopped at is now a hardware supply. The toy store where Ethan begged for glow-in-the-dark dinosaurs is a nail salon. The woman inside is talking on speakerphone in Vietnamese. Her laugh is genuine. The world moved on without you. It didn't even stumble. Here's your historical fact of the night. In 1989, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that actual innocence is not, by itself, enough to guarantee release from prison. The logic. Procedural rules still matter. Historians still argue whether that ruling did more harm than good. But it's part of why so many people like you remained locked up longer than they should have. Your case was one of the lucky ones, or maybe just loud enough. You pass by a newsstand. The front page of a local magazine shows Marla's newest headline, "The Woman They Almost Buried Alive, a Justice System's Quiet Undoing." You don't buy it, but you read the article online later. She captures it all without pity, without flair, just honesty. You send her a thank you card. On the back, you write, "Some things rot in the dark, others just take root." One afternoon, you attend a panel discussion on wrongful convictions at a university. You're not a guest speaker, just an attendee in the back row. But during Q&A, a student raises her hand and asks what it really feels like to lose that much time. The speaker, a man who spent 20 years in prison, pauses, then says, "You lose track of who you were supposed to become." It hits you in the ribs. Because yes, that's exactly it. You could have been a professor, a counselor, Ethan's school field trip chaperone, maybe even a PTA mom in mismatched socks, but instead, you became something else. A lesson, a warning, a whisper people reference in caution. You sit with that truth. You don't fight it. You've learned that healing doesn't mean rebuilding the old life. Sometimes it just means learning to live in the one you've got. A quirky fact. Before you drift, in ancient Rome, the goddess Justitia was rarely depicted with a blindfold. That image came much later. Originally, she had open eyes alert, watching, unflinching, because the Romans believed justice had to see clearly in order to work. You wonder what she would have thought of your case, whether she would have blinked. You hope not. Later, you go home and sort through a box labeled Ethan, school. You haven't opened it in years. Inside are macaroni art projects, bent crayons, and a math test with a gold star on top. You find a piece of paper folded in four, a writing assignment. When I grow up, I want to be a paleontologist because dinosaurs are cool. And I like bones. You cry, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. Finally, then you refold the paper. You place it on the shelf beside your notebook. Because grief, you've learned, doesn't always live in your chest. Sometimes, it lives in your filing cabinet. It's late October now. The air in Willow Creek has that crisp, bite it gets right before Halloween. Kids in sweatshirts run past your building holding plastic swords and giggling. There are pumpkins on porches, ghosts made from pillowcases swaying in the breeze. You used to decorate, too. Ethan once insisted on putting googly eyes on everything. He thought even the lamp needed a costume. You think about that as you sit on your steps, a warm cup of cider in your hands, the ceramic heavy with memory. You don't cry this time. You just smile and sip. Elias calls with unexpected news. A local museum is doing an exhibit about justice in Colorado, a century of crime and reform. He says they're including a section on wrongful convictions. He says your case is being featured. You pause, not because you're upset, but because you didn't realize the story had become history. You agree to lend them a few scanned documents, even the court sketches. You keep the originals. There are still things you don't want to let go of. Not yet. That night, you have a dream you haven't had in years. Ethan is standing in a hallway, bathed in morning light. He's holding something behind his back. You walk toward him, but the hallway stretches longer. You call out. He smiles, doesn't speak. When you finally reach him, he pulls his hand forward. It's a butter knife, clean, harmless. He hands it to you like a joke. You both laugh. You wake up smiling, even though your cheeks are damp. Here's a relevant piece of mainstream history. In 2004, the Innocence Project helped exonerate its 150th person using DNA evidence. That case involved a man imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit based almost entirely on eyewitness testimony. Historians still argue whether our memories are reliable enough for courtrooms. The science says no. The system, so far, says it depends. You learned the hard way that it depends can mean everything. Your sister visits for the first time in months. She brings muffins and a stack of mail she forgot to forward. You sit on the porch in silence for a while. She mentions the museum exhibit, says she might take her daughter to see it. I want her to understand what they did to you, she says. You nod. Then she adds, I should have said something. Back then, I should have asked more questions. You look at her. Really look. The dark circles, the careful posture. She's aged, too. Her guilt has lived alongside yours this whole time. It's okay, you say, and you almost mean it. She squeezes your hand. That's all you need. In a strange twist, someone from the police department reaches out next. A younger detective. He wasn't on the case back then. He says he's reopening several files related to Delano, looking at possible missed connections. He wants to know if you remember anything else. You don't? Not really. You remember the sound of your own heartbeat in your ears, the smell of sweat, the color of the moonlight on the carpet, but that's about it. He thanks you anyway, tells you your courage helped reopen doors for other victims' families. You hang up feeling something close to peace. Here's a fringe detail to dream on. In ancient Persia, wrongful punishment required a ceremony of reversal, where the accused would symbolically undo their shame by walking backward through the courtroom. The idea was that time had wronged them and now time had to make amends. You think about that sometimes? What it would feel like to walk backward through the last 10 years, to unsay what was said, to unlose what was lost. You spend that weekend in quiet. You write a letter to Marla, thanking her again. You mail a copy of one of Ethan's crayon drawings to the museum. You clean your windows. You make a pot of soup that tastes like fall. Life doesn't feel normal, but it does feel livable. You've stopped asking for a clean ending. You've started asking for tomorrow. It's a Tuesday morning when you find the letter in your mailbox, plain envelope, no return address, careful handwriting. You hesitate before opening it, something in your gut telling you it's not junk mail. Inside is a short note, just a few lines. I was wrong about you. I don't know if that matters now, but I needed to say it. You stare at the page for a long time, the edges soft from your grip. You read it again, then a third time. The ink is smudged, maybe from sweat, maybe tears. You're not sure whose? You don't call him, you don't reply. You fold the letter once and slip it into the back of your notebook. Let it live there. Quietly, later that day, you attend a panel discussion, this time as a speaker. Marla sits beside you, a stack of her books on the table. Elias is in the front row. The topic is innocence and aftermath. You speak slowly, carefully, as if shaping the words can protect them. You tell the audience that the hardest part wasn't the prison. It wasn't even the trial. It was the doubt in yourself, in your memory, in your worth. You say no one tells you how to rebuild after being publicly broken, but you figured it out. One morning at a time. You don't cry, not until someone in the back raises their hand and says, "Thank you for surviving." Then your voice breaks a little, but only for a moment. Here's your historical footnote. In 2011, Illinois became the first state to abolish the death penalty after several wrongful convictions came to light. One of the key cases involved a man freed after 17 years on death row. Historians still argue whether abolition was about morality or liability, but for many, it was about finally acknowledging human error. You weren't sentenced to death, but for a long time, you stopped living. The museum exhibit opens with modest fanfare. You visit on a quiet weekday. The receptionist doesn't recognize you. You like it that way. You walk slowly through the gallery, cold tile, soft lighting, white walls lined with placards. Your section is near the end. There's a timeline. A copy of your exoneration letter under glass, a photograph of Ethan, taken from a school yearbook. Smiling, messy-haired, completely unaware of the shadow the world was about to throw over him. You place a hand gently against the glass, not to make a scene, just to say, "I see you." On the way out, a teenager is staring at the map of Colorado cases. He glances at you, then at the wall, then back at you again. "Were you?" You nod. He doesn't ask for a selfie. He just says, "That was messed up." You give a half smile. "Yeah, it was." That evening, you finally allow yourself to dig through the old boxes in your closet, the ones labeled "Do Not Open." You find Ethan's Halloween costume from 1996, still with a tiny rip near the seam. You find a locket he made out of tinfoil. You find a crumpled note in your own handwriting. "Tomorrow, we go to the pumpkin patch. Don't forget juice boxes." You press it to your lips. Then you tuck it in the drawer beside your bed. Here's your odd bedtime fact for tonight. In the ancient Andes, the Inca believed that forgetting the name of a loved one who died caused them to wander in the afterlife lost, unable to return. So they whispered names into woven cloth, embedding memory into fabric. They wore those memories until they fell apart. You don't need a cloth. You have his name. You say it aloud that night, softly. Ethan. And the room, somehow, feels warmer. There's no resolution, not really. Just the growing ability to carry it differently. You don't want justice anymore. You want peace. And some nights you actually get it. You don't notice it at first, but one day while brushing your teeth, you catch your own reflection doing something new. You're humming. It's not loud, not cheerful, just a faint tune you can't quite place. Something from Ethan's old lullaby CD. You haven't heard it in years, but your mouth remembers. Your body remembers. Like some part of you has finally gotten permission to breathe again. You spit, rinse, and stare at the mirror. You don't look young, but you look present. That's more than you could say a year ago. The next big shift comes quietly. Elias tells you the state's office is drafting a policy proposal, one that would require mandatory review of past convictions tied to known serial offenders, like Troy Delano. Your case helped push it forward. You smile at the idea that Ethan might still be changing something, helping someone else's mother. Years later, you want to be involved. Elias asks, you think about it, about press conferences and task forces and board meetings filled with people who say, due process like it's a magic spell. Then you nod, just a little. You attend your first policy meeting in Denver. You sit at the back. You listen. Lawyers talk about data and liability. Victims' rights advocates speak about repair, dignity, balance. One woman cries as she shares how her son was accused, then exonerated, but never emotionally recovered. You nod along. You know that part. You finally raise your hand and speak when systems don't say sorry. They teach silence, not safety. The room falls still. No applause. Just a quiet kind of agreement that settles into the walls. You get asked to return for the next round of discussions. Meanwhile, life inches forward. You start dating someone. Slowly, carefully. His name is Joel. He's a librarian. He doesn't ask about your past at first, which is part of why you let him stay. The first time you tell him about Ethan, it's raining. You're sitting in his car, and the windshield wipers keep time like a heartbeat. You expect discomfort or pity, but Joel just says, he sounds awesome. You don't cry. You just say, he was Here's a historical touchpoint to consider. In post-World War II Germany, the concept of Vergangenheitsbewältigung, coming to terms with the past, emerged as a national practice. It meant acknowledging wrongs not with shame, but with open discussion. Historians still debate whether it worked, but the goal wasn't perfection, it was process. You've decided to live your own version of that, quietly. Daily, you and Joel visit a lake in early spring. He skips rocks. You try and fail. You end up laughing as your rock plops straight down. The sound echoes across the water. You say, "Ethan would have loved this." Joel doesn't say, "I'm sorry." He just says, "Tell me more about him." So you do. You talk about how Ethan used to pretend every puddle was a dinosaur trap, how he once taped googly eyes to the fish tank, how he called smoothies fruit soup, and insisted he'd invent one for dogs. It feels good to talk. You forget how much silence you had grown used to. At home, you take the photo of Ethan from your closet and finally hang it in the hallway. Not hidden, not a shrine, just a photo, smiling, real. You pass it each morning and nod. "Hey, buddy." It becomes part of your rhythm. One night, Joel finds the tape, the one you digitized. He doesn't press play, just holds it up like a question. You say, "That's my voice," and his laugh. He smiles. Then it's priceless. Your quirky sleep fact tonight comes from 17th century Scotland. It was believed that if a grieving person could dream of their lost loved one 3 times, their soul would be at peace. The dreams didn't have to be long, just enough to know the person was safe, remembered, and seen. You've dreamt of Ethan 5 times now. He never speaks, but he always smiles, and that's enough. You don't plan to become an activist. You just keep showing up for meetings, for panels, for the girl who writes to you after reading about your story in her high school ethics class. You write back every time, because when no one believed you, one person did. Now, you try to be that person for someone else. The first time someone stops you on the street, you think they're lost. You're walking out of a bookstore, coffee in hand, when a young woman in a windbreaker approaches. "Excuse me, are you Catherine Miller?" You hesitate. You still don't know whether that name will bring sympathy or suspicion, but you nod. She smiles nervously. "I just wanted to say, I read about you. What they did to you was horrible, and I'm so glad you're okay." You blink. The coffee sloshes slightly in your hand. You thank her. She's already walking away. Just a quick moment. No photos, no tears, but the feeling lingers for hours. Someone saw you and didn't look away. That evening, you reread one of Ethan's old stories. A school assignment. Something about a talking lizard and a spaceship made of juice boxes. The spelling is a disaster. The drawings are upside down. It's perfect. You imagine him writing it in class, legs swinging under the desk, chewing on the eraser. You imagine the way he would have handed it to you, grinning like he'd written a Pulitzer. You tuck it back into the folder. Carefully, lovingly, Joel shows you a new shelf he's building for your memory boxes. He says, "You didn't ask for that. He just thought it might help." It does. You line the shelf with a few pieces at a time. The macaroni necklace, the photo booth strip, the Crooked World's Best Mom badge made from cardboard and tape. You don't hide them anymore. Here's a historical note to carry with you. In 1974, the state of Michigan passed one of the earliest victim compensation laws in the U.S. Initially, it only applied to victims of violent crime, not those wrongfully convicted. It took decades and dozens of court battles to expand those protections. Historians still argue whether the law evolved through empathy or embarrassment. You suspect both. You got your compensation. You used some of it to start a scholarship fund for single mothers going back to school. You name it after Ethan. Sometimes you drive past the old apartment. You don't stop, but you glance up at the second floor. The blinds are different now. The railing has rust. Someone else's shoes are by the door. You don't feel sadness anymore. Just distance, like looking at a house in a dream you can't return to. Marla invites you to a book signing. Her new release includes updated chapters. One of them is yours. You attend, quietly. No table, no fanfare, just a seat in the back row, and a pen in your coat pocket in case anyone asks for yours. Afterward, a woman your age, maybe a little younger, approaches. "My son was almost taken from me," she says, "because of a mistake. Your story helped me fight." You hold her hand as she cries. You don't give her advice. You just let her cry. Joel starts leaving notes around the apartment. Little ones, you're doing great. Tea's on the stove. I'm glad you stayed. You pin them beside Ethan's drawing of a dinosaur with glasses. The past and present, taped together. A quirky bedtime detail for tonight. In medieval Ireland, wrongfully accused women were sometimes given land as compensation and instructed to walk its borders barefoot at dawn to mark it as theirs. It was part ritual, part legal formality, a way to re-enter the world with proof under their feet. You don't have land, but you have a trail. You walk near the river every Sunday morning, shoes on, coffee in hand, scarf wrapped loose. You smile at joggers. You nod to dog walkers. You are not the ghost of Willow Creek anymore. You are Catherine Miller. And people say your name now without flinching. On your birthday, Joel makes carrot cake. You don't tell him Ethan hated it. You just eat a slice, watch the candles flicker, and close your eyes. You don't wish to go back, you just wish for peace. And for once, you feel like you already have it. You wake up to bird song and sunlight sneaking through the blinds. There's no urgency in your chest, no dread waiting behind your ribs, just the soft weight of the blanket and the quiet stretch of a new morning. It's been almost 5 years since you walked out of that correctional facility. You don't mark the exact day anymore, not because you forgot, how could you, but because it no longer defines the calendar. You make tea. Joel is still asleep. You let him be. The apartment is warm, lived in. Plants trail across on the windowsill. The bookshelf has overflowed onto the floor. One corner holds a crate labeled Ethan's box, not hidden, not on display, just there, like family. Later, you drive out to the community center. The small classroom smells faintly of dry erase markers and printer toner. You volunteer here once a week now, reading skills, basic writing, life after prison. You don't call it mentoring. You just show up and talk to people who know what it's like to be doubted by default. Today, one of the women, a mother of 2 named Rosa, tells you she wants to write a children's book about her daughter's dream of becoming a scientist. You nod, genuinely thrilled. You tell her to start with 1 sentence. She smiles. Begins. You think about how small beginnings lead to revolutions no one ever sees coming. In the evening, you visit Ethan's grave. You bring one of his drawings laminated in plastic, the one with the spaceship and the dog wearing sunglasses. You press it into the soil gently, like planting a flag. You sit for a while. Tell him about your week. Joel's silly joke. The woman writing the book. The banana bread that refused to rise. You pause. Then say, I'm okay now. Not because it's over, but because you're learning to live in what's left. One final historical note for your journey. In ancient India, a wrongfully punished person could demand a second trial heard not by judges, but by poets. They believed poets, more than lawyers, understood the nuances of truth. Historians still debate whether it ever worked. But you like the idea. If someone had written your trial as a poem, maybe it would have gone differently. But now, you have your voice back, and you don't whisper anymore. You return home. Joel's making soup, something with garlic and thyme. The apartment smells like comfort. You slip off your shoes, hang your scarf, and tuck the photo of Ethan back onto the fridge beneath a grocery list. You light a candle. You sit down on the couch, and for the first time in a long time, you don't feel like something's missing. You just feel whole. Let's slow things down now. You've walked with Catherine through the coldest parts of grief, through courtroom silence and fluorescent lit cells, through memories that ache, and the kind of love that never quite lets go. But here, as the story draws to a close, the edges soften. Imagine the sound of that river path she walks on Sundays, the leaves rustling above her, the steady rhythm of her boots on gravel, a scarf tucked loose around her neck, the wind just barely cool against her cheeks. She passes a bench. A mother and child laugh in the distance. A dog barks twice and is gone. She breathes deeply, not because it's a habit, but because she can. There's no fanfare for survival, no applause for endurance, but there is stillness. There's tea on the stove, a book left open by the bed, a voice recording on an old thumb drive, and a boy's laugh that echoes in dreams not as a wound, but as warmth. You're allowed to rest now. Catherine is safe, and somewhere, someone else is waking up to the truth because her story was finally heard. Let the quiet settle around you like a blanket. Let the weight of the story drift from your shoulders. You're here, you're okay, and the night is kind again.